Okay, I think we are live now. So, hello everybody. My name is Joanna from the channel Joanna, and here I have Overly Average Ben here with me to talk about Joe Abercrombie's book Red Country. So, welcome Ben. You want to tell us about your channel a little bit?
Hello, I feel like my channel is kind of like an irreverent place of whatever gets put up now. Um, so I mostly it's wrap ups now. I feel like that's the consistent thing. I've got better at actually talking about the books I read, and then I'll put up the occasional like skit or something that's meant to be funny. It's up to you whether you interpret that way.
Overly Average Ben is very funny, by the way. Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about this. So, Ben and I read this actually last month. Hopefully, we will retain some details about it, and we will start off this discussion totally spoiler free. So, just to start off with, just some general thoughts. So, this is a standalone. It's called a standalone, but it's the sixth book in the First Law world, also the third quote unquote standalone. But I always feel weird using the word standalone because
Mm.
really it stands apart in its own way, but it's not really a standalone in the sense it doesn't really stand alone because it kind of ties in a lot of context to previous books and has even spoilers for previous books as well.
Yeah, because I think it's also considered like the third in like it's called like the Great Leveler trilogy. So
Oh,
I feel like Abercrombie kind of comes from a place where there is a linear fashion to read them in a sense, and that they are like there is a connected through line through a lot of them through the characters that appear. Um, because that's one thing that I want to get into is with Abercrombie in particular. Um, but yeah, in terms of you talking about where it is positioned.
yeah. Interesting. So I never I almost feel like there should be a separate word to describe it rather than standalone, because when we think of standalones, if I said these are my favorite standalones of all time, I'd feel weird to put any of the first Law standalones on that list for that reason because they are so part of an arc, like you said. So I didn't realize it was called that. That's neat.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I actually reached this book and someone said about it, because it really does. I feel like it provides a lot of context when you look back on it. You're like, oh, I completely understand what they're talking about by this,
Yeah.
um, because there is a particular character that, in terms of, I feel like even in non-spoiler, actually, probably not, but there's a character that appears in all three of them, and it seems like it's their
Mm.
progressive story through all three. Um, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that too as well. So, oh, yeah. Definitely check it out if you get a chance. Nice to see you, Theo. Thank you. Yeah, and then oh, hello, cozy book reviews, and yeah. So I would like to ask first, what were your expectations going into Red Country?
I have to admit, I was not expecting as much from this one, because I'm not a big westerns fan. Like, if there's a genre that does not entice me in the slightest, it's westerns.
Really?
It's funny, but the thing is, I feel like I haven't given it a chance because I read an Elmore Leonard western for a video that I'm doing, and then I've read this, and then I've watched a couple of movies that are like modern takes, and I feel like I've enjoyed every single one of them. So the idea of me saying I don't like westerns is something that was prejudiced from years ago that I should abandon at this point.
Yeah, I've been on the fence about whether I'm a Western person or not. I know I watched the miniseries of Lonesome Dove as a child, and actually I loved it. I loved it
Yeah.
so much as a kid that I've always wanted to read the book, so I will read it someday. But I think what actually I've been reading Stephen King's Dark Tower and Wizard and Glass that I read earlier this year. I think sold me on the Western idea in fantasy. So I was definitely looking forward to this book because I knew that it was a Western setting. So we have some friends here in the chat. Hello, Grace. Yeah, we are spoiler free. I probably should have created a banner, and I'm sorry I did not get that organized. Hello, Philip. And hey, Anita. Yes. Oh, you haven't read First Law yet? Highly recommend. And so I know you had some hesitation. Hello, Jeff. I know you had some hesitation going into this because of the Western part, but were you like me and excited because it's Abercrombie anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Abercrombie has never missed. And one big thing that I took away from this is the length of the book really made me happy. Because Best Served Cold stayed a little bit too over, like it's overstayed its welcome slightly. It was about 150 pages too long in my head that could have been cut down. And so looking at this one, I was like, okay, this seems more concise. And so I was really excited, and I felt that throughout it. There was no part of the book where I wanted it to rush. I feel like it paced it perfectly. Um, and so, yeah, it was very much Abercrombie. His writing style is so unique, so charming, so British that I absolutely adore it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the British part too. There were some words or certain phrases he said in here that just cracked me up because of just how British they sounded. I just
Yeah,
loved them. But I totally agree about the pacing. I feel like this was very evenly paced. And I think the thing about Joe Abercrombie's writing style is I feel like it has a consistency to it. And at the same time, I know a lot of people talk about this, how the characters are they're very distinct. So you could tell any character, even without the taglines of the names, they're just very, very distinct. And at the same time, there's a certain way that he writes, a certain witty way that he writes and
yeah.
flow to his writing that is just so stylistically him.
Absolutely. You as soon as you pick up a book, you don't have to have anything on it. As soon as you start reading it, you know it's Abercrombie.
Yeah.
Like from the first sentence of this book, I was like, okay, I'm back in Abercrombie now. And I
Yes.
think in terms of what's being said here about how dark it is, um, like I think we talked about this when we were reading this book, is that it's there's a levity to it through the humor, and it's more that there's a general sense of pessimism to his world.
Yeah.
Um, and like there's never even if there is optimism, it's underlayered by a genuine pessimism of this world, that there is nothing that's ever going to stay right. Even if it's fixed, it's never going to stay that way. And so that's kind of the
Yes.
darkness where I have to admit, reading the first trilogy, I had to take big breaks between each book because I found myself so disillusioned with in terms of just being like, oh, the world is not good. And then
Yeah.
but there's something about that that entices you back.
Yes,
Where,
I agree. I totally agree. That's exactly how I see it, and I've had some conversations with friends lately about Malas and Book of the Fallen and whether that's grimdark. And without giving away spoilers for Malazan, I don't really think of it as grimdark, but I think that that has to do with, even though there's darkness to it, it's the reasons that the darkness is there and the sort of direction that the narrative takes. With but I can understand the idea that it's grimdark in some ways, because if you're just talking about a story that has a lot of dark tones in it, even if there are light aspects to it. But in this particular series, even though it's very humorous, it's very funny. So a lot of people, especially with the first Law trilogy, they will say that they're surprised it's considered grimdark at all because there is so much humor to it, and it's not quite as bloody and gory as you might expect for that genre. At the same time, it's where you land. And you always know with every Abercrombie books, it's never going to work out for people.
no, no.
It's never going to work out, and but you also are surprised in the way it doesn't work out and exactly how it doesn't work out for which characters. And the way
Yeah,
he does that is so clever. I think it's so clever.
I completely agree. Because I read when I started reading again, it was one of the first things I read was the first Law trilogy, and I actually almost regret it because now that I have a larger context for different writing, I feel like I would have appreciated it even more. But I mean, before they are hanged, there are some parts in that which have real commentary about like the just the British in general, and like especially the approach to war and the kind of um like bloated self-censorship of the British, and I adored that, and I actually read those when I was staying with my great aunt who's 86, and I used to like tell her about things that were happening in the book and kind of quote it, and she found it absolutely hilarious as well. So I feel like it's weirdly free for all ages.
That's
Everyone can read
great.
Abercrombie.
Yes. Yeah, I've thought about that too. I've read some passages to my mother, who doesn't have a well, she likes Breaking Bad, but but usually she doesn't have a high tolerance for really dark material. But she's laughed out loud with some of the passages I've read aloud to her of Abercrombie's. Philip, we'd love to see you in a cowboy hat sometime. Just saying
Absolutely.
it. um, yay! Wonderful. Yeah, Wizard and Glass is fantastic. It just sold me over on the idea of Western fantasy. And I would like to read a little bit more. Yes. Actually, so that's another question I have for you. Where does this rank for you among the standalones?
This fits dead in the middle for me.
Mhm.
The Heroes is up there with before they're hanged as the best of the series so far, and then like I said, Best Served Cold was really like, because people say it's their favorite, and I know that quite a lot of people like say that it's better than the original trilogy. It's amazing, and for me, like I said, it just overstayed its welcome slightly, and I felt like it was retreading because it's. I get that that's the whole point, is because it's drawing from that era, and like the sense of it being quite repetitive in some parts, that like the Count of Monte Cristo, people say that even though it's a masterpiece, that it overstays its welcome as well. So it seems in keeping with the genre, but for me, that this sits comfortably in. I enjoyed it like a lot, but the Heroes still pips it to the best so far.
Yeah, The Heroes is fantastic. I have to admit, this one has been my favorite, and maybe that has to
Nice.
do with loving the Western setting. And I did have to sit with it for a while because actually that was my initial thought when I finished it.
Mm.
I thought, I think this is my favorite. And I decided to just wait and see if I still felt that way. And I'm not sure exactly why it's I mean, I don't know. I just appreciated so many things he did. He does
Yeah,
so many brilliant things in this book. We're going to try to talk about as many of them as possible. But I also want to know why I'm seeing a lot. Okay, good. I'm seeing some praise here. And I want to say, by the way, that I know a lot of people agree with you, Ben. I've heard so many people say that uh, Best Served Cold was not a favorite, and I have to admit that I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more than this wave of people recently. A
yeah,
lot of friends of mine here on BookTube haven't been as big a fan of that book, but at the same time, I did feel at a certain point I did get a little bit it felt a little repetitive for me, and it felt like we were just banging the theme over and over again about mercenaries are not trustworthy people. They're not, and I just wanted to move on. And
yeah,
then he still completely surprised me, and I loved the ending of that. But at the same time, I think there's something about this book that I thought was just very unique. I loved the Western setting. There is kind of a Bonnie and Clyde kind of aspect to the story that I loved. His descriptions of settings, especially in this book, I think is what won me over. I'm a big time settings type of reader because I'm a very visual type of reader. I
mm,
visualize everything I read. And so the way that he talked about certain places like creeks just came alive in a very not beautiful way by any means, but it was hysterical to me. It was incredible the way he did it. And I
yeah.
just think like there were so many characters that were secondary and tertiary characters that he utilized in such a creative way that I thought was just brilliant the way he plotted everything and made everything come together.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in terms of like a singular plot, this is the most cohesive and well structured. In terms of like you were saying, set up and payoff are really like wonderfully executed in this book. Um, and I think I think it is in terms of as an actual book, I think Red Country is a superior book out of the three, in terms of just on its actual merits of writing, and you can tell that he's improving with each book. But there's something about the heroes. I think it's the kind of that appeals more to me as a setting, if you get what I mean, and an environment. So I feel like the hero still edges it for that reason. But I think you are right.
Yeah, well, The Heroes is fantastic too. It's almost kind of hard to even for me to even pick between the two in some ways because I thought The Heroes was amazing too. Um, and actually, even with that said, uh, that, let's see, it's not the gore, though it's there, that makes Abercrombie books scream to me. Yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that said, this book actually did get quite a bit gory for me at a certain point, like much more gory than I've seen him go in the
Yeah.
past. And I was kind of surprised by it. Like I said, it kind of reminded me almost like of a slasher horror at one point. I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, because I think I mentioned this is going to be a niche reference for people, but there is a film called Bone Tomahawk, which came out probably about 6 years ago now, and that is it's a western that is very much set up as a western, and then halfway through it turns into a cannibalistic horror film,
Oh,
and it's like I feel like it's definitely not the same. There's no spoilers in terms of that, in terms of like it's not the exact same plot, but in terms of the idea of a book setting up a world and then abruptly changing the stakes and altering and going really dark. Like it starts off dark, but this book I think has some of the darkest moments in the entire like series that I've read so far.
yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And um I think like some of the things that he does too, in addition to, I mean, just having a darker tone, I guess. Like, yeah, I like what Philip said about alienation, because I think you could have some very uplifting fantasy that goes into some gore, that goes into some dark things, but it's kind of like that sort of sets the stage to create that uplifting nature. And the themes, and you were bringing up the UK. I loved how you were bringing that up with Before They're Hanged, and how that was sort of highlighting some of the, like, creating some disillusionment, or highlighting that in some way. I feel like he does that with his themes too. Like he takes a lot of ideals that we see in fantasy, like courage, hope, being a hero. I mean, I feel like the heroes was kind of hitting on that in and of
Yeah,
itself. And really just, and even like Here Comes the Cavalry, I feel like even Best Served Cold can almost be mocking that in a little, in a small way, maybe, or in a way. Um, I feel like he's taking a lot of those tropes that we love in fantasy and sort of showing you a darker side to them.
absolutely. He reminds me of I think it's weird to say this, but I feel like the closest comparison I can give to him for how he approaches themes and concepts is Terry Pratchett, because he takes like quintessential tropes and switches them, but rather than the levity that Pratchett brings, he brings it in a completely different sense. It's still the same levity, but it's in the opposite direction of like a moral compass. Um, and so, yeah, I always think of Pratchett when I read him, and also you can definitely tell in terms of like heroic fantasy. Like I read David Gemmell, I read Legend by him, and reading it after reading Abercrombie, you can pick up on the things that Abercrombie very clearly read him as like a youth or something, and has taken tropes from directly from that series and has applied them to the first Law trilogy.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. Yeah, I've wondered about that too. I think I did think a little bit about well, a lot of people I think about the Lord of the Rings with the first Law trilogy too, and how
Yeah,
he's sort of subverting what's, our ideals in the Lord of the Rings there too. But it's also interesting what you brought up about Pratchett, because it seems like they are sort of doing similar things in yet a different way, or landing in a different way.
I feel like I describe I liked what you said in terms of the idea of relating Malazan and or I don't know how to pronounce it still, I'm terrible.
I
But
probably don't pronounce it right either. It's
but
okay.
reading because I've read Dead House Gates, I've read the
Oh,
first
yeah.
two so
Yeah.
far, and I feel like there's often like it is grimdark in terms of how it approaches things, but it has those hero moments. It has that that parallel between the depravity and the heroes that are kind of there, and they may not always be heroes, but in those instances they are. And um and then like Stormlight Archive has like real gore and some real dark moments that is then undercut to play that big hero moment. And yeah, Abercrombie just approaches it from building up this tension, and rather than a hero moment, it's like, and now we're at the lowest we've ever been. Like we've built up all this tension just to break everyone down even more, and then we're just going to do it again for the rest of the book.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how it is for you, but and this will go, I think we could talk about this later with spoilers. I feel like we could almost do this whole talk spoiler free. Because there's so much we could just cover from a non-spoiler point, but I don't know about you, but I feel I talked about this in my heroes review, and I know some people said they felt the same way, and some people said they didn't, and that's completely fine. Everybody's experience is valid. But I tend to feel when I'm reading Abercrombie, I enjoy his characters. I really enjoy them, but I don't really feel deeply attached to them at the same time.
Mm,
And I don't know why that is. Like I just don't feel like, and if it has to do with kind of like the absurd quality of what he's doing, and I don't know what it is, but I just feel like there's a certain character that dies, for example, in this book. And it was
yeah.
interesting the way it happened and it was
Yeah.
unexpected, but I didn't feel like sad or I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes me a bad person, but I didn't feel very attached.
I felt the exact same way because I feel like he plays with characters from a distance. Um because I think it comes from the fact that because you can tell every character based on their description and everything, that they stop almost being a character and they become like a symbol within the story. They become part of the trope and they become part of the what's the word? The themes and everything, that they're not directly um characters anymore. They're almost caricatures in some sense, some of them
Yes.
are. And
Yes.
the way that they're like the progression is very much sometimes so farcical that that's the best thing. And I would definitely you booktube boxing me and Andrew. I think he's talking about himself there, to be fair. But yeah, yeah, I really his characters are second to none in my opinion. Like the way that he approaches characters, it seems like there's a real sense of exactly who they are and what we're meant to take away. I think that's the best thing to appreciate in the first trilogy, especially, is that moment when you do realize that they're talking about a character and watching how other people view that character that you've been reading from their perspective. Like I don't think this would be a spoiler because it's in the first book, it's in the blade itself, and it's the first instance of like you've been following Glocker the entire book, and then you have that first instance. I think it's like 200 pages in. You have from Giselle's point of view, and it's just the way that he kind of like the absolutely callous, horrific way that he describes Glotka, and he's like waste of space type thing. Like you don't bother with him. And then you've read from Glotka, and there's just a real juxtaposition, and the way he poses people against each other, it reveals more about the character you're reading from, how they view the other characters. That's how I always think.
Yeah. I love how he does that. I love how he does that. I think there are several instances where he kind of does something similar throughout the series with the
Yeah.
way that he plays with perspectives of characters through other character perspectives. And it's interesting to me because I know I was talking about this with somebody on their review who was not a fan of first law books and Abercrombie's writing style, which is totally, like I said, it's totally valid, but I think it's interesting because I hear a lot of people. This is going to make it sound like I'm not a fan, that I'm criticizing Abercrombie, and I'm not by saying this. Um, I hear a lot of praise for his character work, and I think it's very well deserved. I think his characters are incredibly distinct. They come off the page. You could tell each character just by, like I said, without the name tags. What is it? Phillips test. I forgot what you called it. The
Oh,
character test, dialogue test. The dialogue test. It's where you can look at any line of dialogue and know what character it is. I feel like Abercrombie is a master at that. And at the same time, as I say that, I still feel like his characters are a little embellished,
mm,
where as much as people say they're realistic, I don't feel like they're that real. Like you said, caricature,
yeah.
that to me fits. Because if I were to see Glokta in real life, or a Logan in real life, or Giselle, I just like in my mind, and again, I have like a weird imagination. So I'm just picturing like a person with like slight distorted face makeup or something that looks real but isn't, or something's off. I don't know. Like they all look like that to me in my mind. They all seem a little quirky and demented in some way. So I don't know that I really see them as realistic people. Whereas in some books I've read, like I think like for example, Erickson's characters, well, some of them are a little embellished too, but some of them are really, they feel like real people to me, like people I would know in real life. So it's really strange to say that because like I said, I know it sounds like I'm being critical, but I love that. I don't mind it at all. But I think it's also maybe part of why I feel that little bit of distance from them. This is
Yeah,
about it.
I feel like approaching Abercrombie is in a sense like because it's very much a satire in a lot of ways that it's like watching a I feel like Andrew's having a mad time in the chat. Uh
It happens
I'm
to me.
absolutely frightened. I
Are you
feel like
getting
I'm
on
gonna
your
have
phone, Andrew? Because every time I try to chat on a live stream on my phone, I make so many errors. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, I feel like yeah, it's like approaching a satire. It's like watching a comedy versus a drama. Like when you read something like Live Ship Traders, you've got these absolutely like deep-rooted real characters that if you replace the names of the places and made them a real place, you could imagine this story still existing apart from the live ships themselves. But that if you just took the relationships and everything, it's completely real. Whereas approaching Abercrombie, there is like a sense of it's like adapting like a comedy and that their characters are never going to be 100% true to life. They've got that archetypal nature to them that it's still one of my favorite things. It's interesting that for you it's kind of like, oh, I wish that in some ways that I connected more,
Oh
whereas for
no,
me,
I don't even
uh,
feel that way. I don't. I know that sounds awful. It makes me sound like a horrible person. I wouldn't change any of it though.
yeah,
That's the thing. It sounds like I'm being critical when I say that. And it sounds like I'm being callous when I'm saying, "Oh, I didn't mind that character died." But it doesn't, it's not any sort of diminishment of my enjoyment of those characters.
yeah, I
So
completely agree.
it's perfect. It to me, although I guess I don't think this is the best analogy because I have cried over watching musicals before, but it kind of almost reminds me of watching a musical. And I've been in musicals before. You wear a lot of makeup and dress in
Yeah,
costume and but I don't know, but at the same time you're into the drama of it. You're into what's happening. That's probably not the best analogy, like I said, because I've cried my eyeballs out before watching musicals. But yeah, I don't really get emotional in that way. I laugh more than often than not, but I am thoroughly engaged with them. I'm thoroughly like invested in what's going to happen and enjoying my time with the characters. But yeah, it's strange because I don't really feel like an emotional, I don't feel an empathy with them in that
yeah,
space,
I think that's the best way. Yeah.
which I challenge anybody who's like, I guess that challenges the whole idea of reading makes you empathetic. I'm like, well, Abercrombie doesn't really make me empathetic, but I don't even know what's happening in the chat now.
I know it's gone wild. Andrew was very much it's broken
Yay.
it down. I feel like what wait, I don't even oh yeah, I do.
Oh.
Um I mean it's already half midnight here, so I feel like I could stay up for dawn for Andrew.
Yeah, I know I might be alone in that. I've had, I think Zara, who's a huge First Law
Mm.
fan, she's the one who actually got me to read the original trilogy. She also feels that way too. She was surprised I said I felt that way, like that distance with the characters. And again, I don't mean it as a negative thing, but yeah, they feel a little embellished to me, and that's not a bad thing. Yeah. Sorry, what were you
Um
saying, Ben?
oh, I was gonna say that yeah, like you said, I do actually completely agree with you, and I do view it as a positive.
Yeah.
Um and especially in sometimes I feel like the arcs are even a little embellished, where it's kind of like
Oh,
this
yeah.
is like the depths of depravity that we're going to is
Yeah.
almost farcical, and it's only because of the portrayal of the character that stops it being like completely morbid and morose. it's that the facade that's put on these characters makes you completely invested in not even like you said, I don't feel invested in the character. I feel invested in the mess and the chaos that they're going to create as a result of it. Um, and I feel like Abercrombie's like watching a car accident where you kind of you sat there and you're like, oh no, I'm going to read another 50 pages because I have to see what terrible thing's going to happen.
Yeah. It's one thing I've been noticing about Abercrombie, and I don't know if this is exactly an exact correlation or exact relationship, but I have noticed that it seems to me like with his settings, because like I said, I really enjoy just seeing what authors do with settings. It seems to me like the settings when they're in nature seem indifferent. Like nature seems indifferent to whatever psychologically is happening with the characters. Like it just doesn't care. Like the
Mm,
world is indifferent in nature. And like, and sometimes that, it's kind of funny the way that happens too. But then other time, but when they're in society, when they're in cities or in places where there's any sort of type of civilization, it's just disgusting and
yeah.
horrible and dark and creepy and twisted. And the descriptions he comes up with are just, they really set a totally different tone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm making that up in my head, but I've been really paying attention to that. I sort of sense that. Like nature is indifferent and then civilization is just like this chaos or something.
Yeah, I agree. I think a big thing in this book in terms of it is how humans affect nature, especially in terms of the new frontier idea. Because there is a latent. I think it's a thing through all of his books. Because like the First Law trilogy definitely has the colonization like aspects, but this one as well has a real sense of the effect that they're having on the frontier and the what's happening in this place and the this new blood is completely ravaging some parts. And I feel like that's definitely an aspect of well is that I think like in the First Law trilogy, I definitely get what you mean in terms of nature not caring the slightest. I think Before They Are Hanged definitely has elements of that for one particular plot line. But for this one, I felt like it was that because they have problems with in terms of nature, but this was very much like the collision between a larger society and a smaller society and the mess that happens from that. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's the one thing that Abercrombie also always does is there's always these like subtextual um, like through lines through all of his work, so you can always get a sense of yeah, that's exactly it. Is like when there's so many moving pieces, you're just this one individual cog inside of it, and it's like a maelstrom that's just whipping through. Um, and I think that definitely happens in this book. And for one particular plot line is, and I think it's the like in terms of not getting into spoilers, I think that's what creates the when we were talking about the darkest aspect in terms of like an Abercrombie book is through that sense of what happens.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think that, do you have any other spoiler-free thoughts to share before we just go into a few spoilers?
No, it'd just be read First Law. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Civilization does not improve over time. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. It's the civilization theme is definitely it's something that we see in a lot of fantasy. I feel like a lot of fantasy is anti-civilization. At
Yeah.
least with a lot of the fantasy I've been reading, but I think the way Abercrombie does it, it definitely has its own kind of he has his own way of approaching that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's like quite often like I mean, fantasy has always had like that secular nature of history, like history's a circle and all that jazz. And I feel like Abercrombie comes at it like it's been said, where it's history is a circle that is progressively. It's like it's going inwards, like rather than expanding and growing. And like as each rotation happens, we're growing as a people and becoming larger. This is like in each circle, we're getting closer and closer to that final dot where all of society collapses and we're all done. And that's like it's like the same way like being the opposite to Pratchett, like a polar opposite. It's the same thing where traditional fantasy we're seeing a sense of even whilst being anti-civilization in a lot of ways, it's that this smaller if you're in a smaller community, you can still band together, you can still be this people. We should all help each other. Whereas Abercrombie's very much like we should all help each other destroy ourselves and end up in this
Yes.
disgusting place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because like kind of going back to what we were saying before, just he really takes some of these like idealistic themes and just turns them on their head. And I love the way he does that. It's just so amazing. And even just some of the themes that we look down on too, like cowardice, and sort of giving you a different perspective on that too, that maybe in the first law world, cowardice is kind of being smart in some ways.
Yeah.
I just get a kick out of that. So fantastic. Then I guess we'll go ahead from here and just go into spoilers. So if you have not yet read the First Law series, if you've not yet read Red Country, then you can go ahead and exit here. Thank you so much for watching. And now we're going to go into spoilers. So spoiler wise, I'm trying to think of where to start with spoilers. Yeah, I think like okay, so is there any idea you want to start with spoilers? Because I just have one that's coming to mind.
Yeah, I have the first two that come into my head. There's quite a few
Okay.
actually, but the first ones that come into my head are either Shy or Lamb.
Yes.
Whether either of those were the ones you were thinking of.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So Shy is a fascinating character. I feel like Shy is one to get to later because she wraps everyone together in this book. So I feel like Lamb as a centerpiece because he is a returning character. Um, and yeah, I like the first thing I want to say is I love that Abercrombie does not hide from who he is. Like Abercrombie makes it very clear immediately exactly who it is that Lamb is, and that isn't a twist, that isn't a surprise throughout the book. It's just like, no, this is Logan, and he is here, and we're gonna like this whole story is about his relationship now, like where he's gone to, and I feel like it was a fantastic job because you've had that whole first trilogy of being in his perspective, knowing who he is as a person, and then you hit this one where you're not in his perspective, but because you have such a rich history of who he is, you know exactly what he's thinking in certain places and how he's viewing situations. Um, and I think that's like it's such a brilliant thing Abercrombie does is use characters that were main characters as secondary characters so you don't have to spend that much time with them. And yeah, Lamb was so brilliant in this book and
Yeah.
terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yes. I love how he takes on the name Lamb too.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea that he was coming back
No,
in
I
this
had no
book?
idea.
I didn't
I
even know he was still. I guess I had a set idea that he might still be alive, but I still wasn't even sure about that.
yeah, like because it's one of those things where he could very much be a character that he just decided to like be like, oh, he died off screen. Like Abercrombie would do that.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is, I knew that he was going to come back at some point because I believe that his like in the second trilogy that there's like a someone related to him or something. So I felt like there had to be some
Oh,
like I feel like because it's like the next generation, I feel like that for some reason I feel like I had heard something like that. So I felt like he was going to be involved. But the way he came back, I was not anticipating
yeah.
because yeah, exactly. He it's like the most hello, I'm here that he could possibly make as a character. It was like a wink to the audience.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, like I was saying, because you were definitely also saying this that he is absolutely terrifying in this book.
Yeah.
And because he's so different. I think that comes down to what we were talking about, the idea of leaving society. And that in the cities, Logan is still crazy, but he fits in. Whereas in here, where it's kind of there's like a kind of novelty sense of violence for some people, and then he turns up and he just decimates everyone,
I
and it's
know.
it's genuinely shocking and terrifying.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts was actually when somebody, I think it was it Casca or maybe it was Temple, who comes up to him, I think I wrote it here, um, and says, "I heard that you were once a king or the king of the north or something." And
Yeah.
then and Shy laughs.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I get such a kick out of how differently you get such a strong sense through Shy's perspective, what a different person he's been in
Yeah.
Lewis's past. And the fact she laughs at that notion, and then he has a line, I wrote it down about, he said, "Men put a golden chain on me for a while and knelt because it suited them. In violent times, folk like to kneel to violent men. In peaceful times, they remember their happier standing." I just love that line. It was
Yeah.
so cool.
And I mean, it's like it's one of those things once again where it's so very true in history. Like even in British history, the idea that Winston Churchill was the man that won the war type thing in how it's viewed, but he lost the next election because we were now in peacetime and he wasn't the person to take us forward in rebuilding. And I feel like that is like it's a great usage of that idea with him because he's not a leader. He should never be. He shouldn't be in charge of anyone apart from a ragtag group of murderers.
Yeah.
And so he's yeah, yeah. There are just certain things where it's just brilliant because I feel like one thing I was also going to say is that you were talking about the idea of the dialogue test, like reading a sentence and reading a bit of dialogue and knowing who it is. I feel like quite a lot you can read the narrator and know whose character perspective it is based on the slight changes of vocabulary and the maybe it's just the slang in terms of being British that like Logan spoke differently to Giselle, and the narrator spoke differently between the two. And I love that each character that you're following their POV has a different slight nuance to how they talk, that even deepens it further. And that's what makes it so rich, like seeing Lamb through someone else's eyes, because it reevaluates everything that he's done and how it's viewed.
Yeah. It's just amazing too. I think that's so true about what you said. And I think it's also just amazing to me. I think that just shows you good character work when you could take a character and put them in a totally different context and they're still clearly that character. And
Mhm.
Lamb, it's just amazing to me because he does get darker and darker and more devolved as we go on through this book. And at the same time, there are still a lot of moments where he retains, like, that fatherly type of person.
Yeah,
Like, when he's talking with Temple, and he's like and especially the parts that just it just messes with you because he's so twisted and he's so horrible, and at the same time, you just can't help but, like, fall in love with those soft parts of him. Like
absolutely.
when he's talking with Temple about Shy, and he's like, "That girl's not a coward. She's just so strong. She's just amazing." And he's just like gushing about her. It's just like it's so fatherly and so warm and tender the way he just talks about her.
Logan definitely, like Lamb broke my heart in this one. I have to admit, like in terms of we were talking about connecting to characters, Lamb did like his devolution and like because you know that he was in a good place. He was genuinely happy with where he was. He was just happy plowing along and just not murdering people. Like that was all he wanted was just not to have to kill people. And then you watch him slowly, like, because you've had that fall before, because you've also read, knowing that Shivers and Logan are parallels of each other in terms of someone trying to get revenge on someone who has traumatized them in their childhood. Because,
Yeah.
like, Logan killed, I forgot who it was in the first trilogy. Like, the whole thing of Logan killed that person to get revenge, and then Shivers has that. So you've seen in Best Served Cold, Shivers have that sense of I want to become a better person, and then you've watched this slow fall in his character that
Oh, yeah.
you then have that, and you know how Lamb feels in terms of because you know how Shivers felt, and it's like all of these things wrap together and create like this just wonderful, fully realized sense.
Yeah. I definitely feel like that's a theme in this book, and it's probably a theme in previous books too was just new beginnings,
Yeah.
because it's like Lamb is trying to have a new beginning. He's trying to have a fresh start, or he was prior to this book, and he can't do it. It just, the first law world does not let you go
No.
towards positive self change or self improvement. And the same thing with Temple. And
Yeah.
Temple really tries to change. He tries, and that's another huge theme is cowardice. So like I know that Lamb tells Shy at the beginning of the book, that sometimes a coward's what you need. He's like trying to go that direction in order to stay good, in order
Yeah.
to stay away from trouble, to stay away from wanting to kill people all the time. So in a way, in the first law world, being a coward isn't a bad thing, but it just, I guess that desire to, go towards greatness or whatever kind of leads to your demise in a way. And with Temple though too, I mean, I don't know, I guess this can be seen from different perspectives, but he does turn towards cowardice when he runs away from Casca. At least in his mind he's being a coward. And then when he goes, and then with Shy, he had the opportunity to leave Shy, and
Yeah.
instead, he decides to stay and to pay off his debts and to be the man that he wanted to be.
I feel like quite a lot cowardice is used as a term for intelligence in the first law
Yeah.
world, where it's like this is the smart move, and then everyone's like, "What an absolute coward!" And it's like, no, this is the clever decision. It's like, no, you're an absolute coward, and it's like everyone's internalized into that. Where it's like I would have died if I didn't do this, but I am now a coward, and I have to accept that. And it's like, no, you were just clever. That was it. That was all you did.
Yes, exactly. That's perfectly well said. Yeah.
Um, and then Temple was an interesting character because I have to admit I did not remember Temple in terms of evidently he was a returning character, but I didn't remember where he was
Oh,
from.
oops. I do not remember. You'll have to
No,
remind me.
I don't. Like that was a big I think he if I remember, he is in Dagascar in Before They Are Hanged, possibly.
Oh.
Because I'm
Oh.
pretty sure Koska says that he met Temple before Friendly, and so that puts it before Best of Cold.
Oh, I think you did mention that when we were buddy reading it.
I
Something
feel
about,
like if
yeah.
someone can mention that, I could be completely wrong because I usually am. But for some reason, like I felt like there was he was referencing the priest that he worked for, and for some reason I have like this nagging. I haven't checked any of this, but because I'm scared of spoilers, because I'm
Yeah.
scared that oh this person returns in the next trilogy or their child does or something. Um, but okay, so evidently it seems like I'm not correct. But for some reason I felt like he was in Dagascar, but evidently not. And I'm happy being wrong because then at least when we both say that we don't remember where he's from, it's because we're not meant to.
Yeah. So I was wondering about that because it seems like everybody who's here watching this and who's even was in the spoiler-free section, it seems like most people here were a fan of this book, which is great. I'm glad to hear that. And I can't imagine wanting to watch a live show necessarily for a book you hate, but I do know some people who really did not like this book, who
Oh,
thought this
really?
was, yeah, that thought that was this was their least favorite, or at least liked it, but it was their least favorite of the standalones, or least favorite Abercrombie. Because, most people, when you love Abercrombie, it's still, you know, you'll still kind of like his books, even if you don't really like it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I wondered why. And I don't know, I don't really have an answer for why people consider this particular book a least favorite. If anybody in the chat happens to consider this a least favorite, let me know. But I was wondering if maybe it had to do with having so many characters. And I think like even now, it's been a couple of weeks and I can't remember I can't remember a lot of the names of characters. And I don't know if that's something that people aren't fond of. But at the same time, I think each one was utilized brilliantly. Um, I don't know. Just a
I don't
thought.
know whether because I feel like oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I feel like he wasn't like a point of
Okay.
view character, and I don't think his name was mentioned. But there's a reference to like, do you know the priest that he's referring to? in like Temple does in the book. He's talking like when he's like, "Oh,
Oh,
my teacher taught me."
yeah.
Like for some reason I feel like it's like Kaji or something, and I remember that name is the name of someone in Before They Are Hanged.
Oh, okay.
And so I feel like, yeah, so that seems like the case that it's not like he wasn't like a character that was mentioned by name, but that I feel like his events, it's alluded to that he was there. And that
Hmm.
is the correct answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that is the best answer.
yeah. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Um, but then who else is there? Shy is a fascinating character.
Hmm.
Um, and she really does tie the whole thing together. And in terms of bringing someone completely new and doing such a good job of being invested in her more than most people. Like even returning characters, I felt more connected and more interested in what Shy was doing and how
Yeah.
she was interacting than I did for Koska or even Shivers. Like I think I said to you when we were reading it, where Shivers is there at the beginning and then just disappears, and he's such a looming presence. Where I'm
Yes,
like, where is Shivers gonna
I
turn
know.
up?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I loved Shy though. She was fantastic. I loved her little gap between her teeth and the way it
Yeah,
cut her. She was just hilarious. And it was interesting because I going into the book, I expected her it does I mean, she does obviously reveal that she when she was younger, she killed a boy. It seemed like by accident, if I'm is that right? Like by
I think
accident.
so.
And she was a thief, I think, is what she revealed at one point
Yeah,
too. Um, but I still expected, like it says here in the blurb here, that she hoped to bury her bloody past and right away smiling, but she'll have to sharpen up some bad old ways to get her family back. So I was kind of expecting a darker backstory, or just not to say that's not dark, but
yeah.
I just was expecting a bit more of her backstory than that.
I
But
think that works in terms of the parallel between her and Lamb. Is that because she does like I think she kills that one person, but then she does kill more when she's like as a thief, I think. Or she does like some real dark stuff that in a normal book would be horrifying in of itself. But I think it's meant to be like, oh, this person is also a bad person that is like stolen and killed someone, and they think Lamb is a monster. And I think
mhm,
like that works even better is that you kind of go in with that expectation of expecting Shy to be a bit darker and grittier, but instead she has like an almost innocence compared to Lamb, and that really heightens his character and the exploration of him, I think.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. It was perfect, their pairing together. And I just think actually even just the interactions between Lamb and Shy and Temple. And I
Mm,
also like what you were saying too when we were buddy reading this about how Temple seems to suffer a lot from imposter syndrome.
yeah.
I thought that was a really clever observation.
Yeah, he constantly oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, so I
Okay.
was right, that is the name I was thinking of. Um, yeah, so, he does, like, a constant job of being like, "Oh, I'm a priest, but I'm just a hack. Like I'm not good. I'm just like I don't believe in anything." And then he starts and he has like this power to him. And then with the idea of I'm a carpenter, I've done a bit here and there. And then he's an architect that builds an entire building. It's
Yes.
like there's a big difference between saying like I've made a table and then building a literal building.
Yeah.
And I think that makes him extremely relatable from the beginning. Is because you know that the cowardice is him actually making smart decisions to like get away from Koska, and then him being someone that doesn't believe in himself and then doing good things is instantly relatable as well,
Yeah.
and sympathetic towards him. That I think that makes his character work extremely well for a new character as well.
And I thought it was actually really funny in my head though that of all places, the city of Crea, this horribly disgusting, muddy oh, just the descriptions of that town. My goodness. That place is so foul and just grotesque. But that is like the one place where all these opportunities just seem to work out for him. It's like his Vegas
Yeah,
or something because he sort of utilizes his carpentry skills, like you said, and becomes this incredible architect. And then he also drafts that, I guess, that
It's like a
that
treaty, right?
proposal
Yeah.
for Crease to be part of the old empire, and then that ends up coming to play at the end. And so I thought it was so brilliant the way his lawyer skills, his carpentry skills, all of his skills kind of come together. And of course, and at the same time as he's a coward, like that does kind of go against him a little bit at the point in which Shy gets kidnapped.
Yes.
but but he does come back and he does try.
That is
You can't
true.
help it.
Because in his head, he's made the right decision because he's being faced down by people he knows he could do absolutely nothing against. And he's like, I'm going to go get Lamb. Like, I don't know whether we saw what he did, but he's going to do a lot better with this than me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for showing up, Bryce. Appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. I was actually, I know I said I'm not like emotionally invested in the characters, but I was rooting for him, and
Yeah.
I do find myself rooting for characters too at the same time. So
I
okay,
think
we'll
I
go
think
back
that
and forth.
plays into it. In the sense of that you do root for Temple. In that moment, you want Temple to pick something up and be able to fight back, not even win, just stand up for himself. And then you do for that moment of lurch where you're like, oh no, he's jumped out a window. Like, what has he done? And like I think like that's another thing that Abercrombie does is that you are invested and you do feel the emotion. And it's not that he's not going to make you cry or like something like that. He's gonna make you feel just like, oh no, and you're gonna feel just like almost let down in a sense. But that pays off when at the end you do feel that he is on the right path.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, and we also have to bring up his like religious skills, like leading the people in prayer.
yeah, he's wonderful, like in that role where he's
Yeah.
just it's just great from like his perspective where you see or like the perspective of Shy where she's seeing it and she's like, wow, he's doing a great job. And then it's from his perspective and he's like, just recycle this, just use some other man's words, just get this done, just tell the people what they want and then we'll be out of here.
That is so funny. Yeah. You mentioned the New Frontier earlier, and I was gonna ask you too about the whole fellowship as well.
Mm.
Your thoughts on the fellowship?
Yeah, so the fellowship was interesting in terms of it feels because you definitely said this is you were like, there's a lot of new characters, like all at once. There's just this chapter where they're like, here is everyone, here's their little bit of history. Let's hope this pays off. And then it does, and it does take a while to get there. Um,
Yeah.
but there is a certain like the I forgot the guy that's running the actual train, but the fact that he's always like, "Oh, my partner's such a cheapskate" type thing, and then it's the reveal. I definitely saw that coming, but I was still so happy to see it because it was so clever and funny. The idea that he's actually cheapskate and his partner is like this really generous dude. I loved that. I thought that was hilarious.
Oh
I
yeah.
know you definitely enjoyed the actor. I
Yes.
remember
Oh,
that.
he was incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
That was amazing. And how he like fooled everybody at the end with his last act. That was amazing. Lestick, I think was his name.
Yeah, I
Something
think
like that.
so.
Yeah, I loved that. Yeah, there was like this whole entire chapter where you are introduced to the horrors, and those are really sad. Some of them had really sad backstories.
Yeah.
Um, and Lestek, and there was a commentary at some point about that, about the fellowship being a way of, I wrote it down somewhere, of exporting the worst evils of city living into the middle of the unspoiled wilderness. So I thought that was really, really dark in a way.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. And
sad.
it does feel like it's like the sentence that do you know like actually I'm not gonna say it, but it actually is Slaughterhouse 5, which we were
Oh
talking
yeah.
about before this began. But there's like a part in that halfway through where it sets up what the entire book's about. And I feel like that sentence you've just read is the exact same for this, where it's like, this is the set piece, this is the entire what this book is about. We're just gonna this is the sentence for you to pick up and know moving forward that that's what we're doing. Um, and I feel like Abercrombie's really good at doing that, like using one sentence just to be like, this is what you should take away from the rest of this book. Remember this type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's that, and then I think like related to, I don't know, there was some interesting commentary about religion and about evil in general too, and about how God is always on whatever side you want him to be, as it matters. So, in other words, we use religion to sort of justify our own motivations for whatever our selfish demands are, and how evil isn't just some demon or some lecherous emperor or something. It's kind of just the simple selfishness of human beings,
Yeah.
just for our small reasons, small selfish ideals, something along those lines. So it's, yeah, there was a lot of commentary about that too. I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because there's that particular there's the character there's a lot of characters in Costco's band that definitely relate to that. Like there's I forgot his name, but he's the religious kind of fanatic in the group, and
Yes,
he's like
Drew, is something.
I forgot his name, but the concept of being like, oh, if God didn't want me to kill these people, he would stop me. And it's
Yes,
like there's something about that idea that is
yes.
just
Oh, I know.
completely absurd and disgusting, and you're
Ugh.
just like, oh my god, like you're a sociopath.
Yeah, and he's the same one, right, who says something about God talks through a man who is Casca or something
Yeah.
like that. I thought, my goodness, that is so psychotic. Like
Yeah.
you're crazy. Yeah.
And I mean, Koska's a character that's got to be discussed,
Oh yeah.
um, because he is the worst. Like
Yeah.
he goes he goes beyond what I thought Koska was capable of, and I thought Koska was capable of a lot of things, but like practical genocide of villages was like, oh,
Oh, I know.
I did not know he could go that far. Um, And I think that relates to, like, the idea of him being definitely, like, the colonizer of this place, that he's coming in with this approved, um, like, "Oh, it's approved malice. I've been unleashed to be able to do this, so it's not my actions." The same way that he talks about the concept of God and, like, "If God didn't want me to do this, he'd stop me," is the same way that Cost kind of views the violence that he does on a grand scale, where he's like, "Well, if they didn't want me to do it, the union would stop me. But I mean, I'm here. They're not watching me, so I'm unleashed." And it's like he views his actions from a distance, um, and he goes on a terrible, terrible journey.
That's wild, isn't it? Because he, like, when I read about Casca in the First Law trilogy, I remember the first word, or the word that has always come up for me whenever I think of Casca, and especially when I first read about his character, was opportunist. This
Yeah,
guy is an opportunist. He will take any situation available to twist it to his gain. Any situation, and he does it with a winning smile.
yeah.
He does it almost with merriment, you know, and yet, yeah, he went so dark in this one. He went totally he went in such a dark direction. And it was
He went like,
also so perfect that he, is it Swarbeck? Is that the name of the biographer?
yeah. I love Swabeck so much.
Yes, me too. I could have
Um,
honestly even used more Swarbeck in this
yeah,
book.
that was I feel like there had to be a little bit of distance because that was so clear satire in this book that I felt like Abercrombie was like, "This may be a bit too on the nose that he's become such a narcissist.
Yeah.
He's hired his own biographer to write his stories." Um, but yeah, Koska because, Koska in the first trilogy, I definitely got a sense of, like, he's a Bronn type from Game of Thrones, like, he's the mercenary, but he's got a little bit of credibility in him, that he has, like, a moral code that may stop him from doing some things. W Completely out the window in this. Like,
Yeah.
I remember reading parts and being like there was a definite point in terms because we're in spoilers, some of the stuff that he does early on, I was like, Koska is dying in this book. There
Oh,
is
really?
oh,
Wow.
in my head, I was like, there's no way he can get out of this because like we've now reached the lowest point he can possibly go. He has completely given up on any sense of moralism or any sense of care for human beings. And at some point, I think like in my head, I was like, someone in his crew is gonna kill him. And I thought it was genuinely gonna be Temple. like early on, that's what I thought was going to happen because we're reading from his perspective. I thought that's going to be the case, but the fact that it was Swarbrick was so perfect.
Yes.
Like the idea of, because it's the idea that I love the kind of the underlying subtext there of like his his truth is the thing that's killing him, like that he is trying to approach this in the sense of creating his own history. He's trying to have this person write it, and the truth of what he's done and who he is has come back and killed him, and that the history will never forget. Like history can't forget some things, and he is one of those people that has done such terrible things that history can't let him go.
Wow. I love that. I absolutely love that. I hadn't thought about it in that way, and I think that's such an amazing insight. I honestly was a little surprised with Swarbeck's development through the book because when we started off with him, like you said, I kind of had the same thought of like, oh, this is perfect, just given how narcissistic Kafka is to have his own biographer. But it seemed like he was almost like Abercrombie was almost mocking biographers in a way or
Yeah,
writers to want to get in on this embellished story of whatever Kafka wanted him to paint of him and this heroic portrait or whatever it was. And so it seemed like Swarbeck was all in and excited about this journey. And it seemed to obviously crash before his eyes. Over time, he was just hating it. But again, I thought it was like poetic justice in the end.
yeah,
It ended up killing Kafka. It was just perfectly well done. And then
and
speaking of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, one of my favorite things in with Swarbrick at the start is where he's like, someone asks whether he's been in a battle, and in his head he's like, I mean, I've quarreled with some quills before, type thing. And it's so like that. It's like I've had basically the equivalent of like a rap battle in his head. He's like, I've had a slam poetry contest. I mean, that's pretty close.
That's perfect. Oh, that's hilarious. Um, yeah, but I was gonna say, speaking again as people spiraling out of control, and I want to go back to Lamb for a second and bring up the interaction with the dragon people.
Oh yeah.
Because oh my goodness, Lamb almost kills what is it, Pit or Roe? One of them. Like he almost
It's Pitt,
is
right?
it Pit? Yeah, I can't remember which kid it is. I
Because
feel so
Rose
bad.
the younger one, and
Mm,
Pitt's the older one, and Pitt's the one that we read from the perspective of, I think,
yeah.
for quite a bit.
And I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
that
but
was
I am totally blanking on some of the names here with the
yeah.
dragon people and the dragon person leader.
Oh, I could never pronounce it. In my
It's
head,
okay,
I'd be
fair
like,
enough.
"And that's the name," and carry on.
Yeah, but I feel like Abercrombie, I mean, obviously there's some Stockholm syndrome a little bit, but I feel like Abercrombie was almost playing with a really dark, uncomfortable idea, which is what if the children are better off with the person who kidnapped them
Yeah,
than their original guardian? And
it's
that's,
really
oh,
morbid.
it's very morbid.
I think
Yeah.
it's also I think it also extremely supports the idea of, oh, what's the word? Like nature versus nurture. That, it's very much like the nurture that the kids were so quick to forget where they'd come from and accept where they were now. And I think it was very much supporting the idea of that, like, people are raised to be the way that they are. And
Mhm.
even if it's in a good sense, like the dragon people, even though it's an inherently bad thing to steal someone's children, don't think anyone's gonna argue with that. I don't think it's gonna be divisive. But, even though that they probably would have been a beneficial thing in those children's lives, that it kind of emblemizes the idea that those children would be raised, it doesn't matter who they are as a core person, they were willing to adopt whatever nature that those people imposed on them, that they would follow whoever it is. Um, and then, of course, that changes for Pitt at the end because, um, oh, what was the brilliant thing? Okay, this is getting off topic, sorry, but I thought this was genuinely one of the most brilliant things in the entire book was the ending with Lamb and Shivers. Um
Mm.
Sorry, actually I will get back to that. I want to talk about the dragon people first because I feel like if we don't get to the dragon people, I'm going to get distracted and not come back to it.
Oh, we'll definitely come back to it though. Yeah,
Yeah, because the dragon people, that was the most heartbreaking part of the book for me. I think we said
me
that to
too.
each other, that it was really the most like disturbing part that he's ever written. And what genuinely moved me and made me sad was just this child that finally felt that they were gonna like they had a family, and then having Lamb just decimate them in front of them and then almost kill them, and it's like I now have no family because you've literally killed that person that like was a father figure, and you've almost killed me, so you're no longer a father figure, you're now a deep-seated enemy. Like there's no going back from that, and these children are just left abandoned in a sense, like morally abandoned.
Yeah, really quickly. Yes, Kyle, unfortunately, we are in spoilers.
Sorry.
But please come back after you read this book because this discussion has been amazing. I'm having the best time. Yay. And
Yeah,
enjoy this
sorry.
book. I think this book is brilliant, honestly. And
Yes.
the more we talk about it, the more I feel that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the dragon people were really interesting. Like I'd be interested to hear what you thought of the dragon people.
Yeah, it's so interesting the way I felt my mind twisting about them because I was totally not for the dragon people initially. I was really horrified by the cult. It felt like very cultish, you know. I mean, for lack, it was a cult. It was a
Yeah,
cult, and they were brainwashing these children. Were at a very vulnerable state as it was. And then at the same time, it's like Abercrombie is just messing with your head because you see through again, this is the brilliance of what he does, like that you already mentioned. He has a way of showing you characters through other characters' perspectives and sort of giving you another, like, even more detailed view. It's just brilliant the way he does it. And so when you see Lamb, when you look back at Lamb and even Shy, through Ro and Pitt's perspectives,
yeah.
when they're with the dragon people, it's so disturbing. It is so it's just awful. It is the worst. Because then you can't help but question for a second, but wait, are they better off? Like, but
Yeah,
then you can kind of understand how they might feel. Well, you can understand how they feel that way for one, even though they are brainwashed. But two, it's like it's just it's so screwed up the way that he
yeah.
messes with your sense of morality about that.
And I mean, one of the biggest things in my head was he's Abercrombie's great at callbacks, and he does it where Pitt goes to leave at the start with the dragon person, and the guy just goes to let her go, and he's like, "You can leave," and then you have the same thing happen at the end where she tries to leave again, and Lamb like wrestles her down, and it's like, "I'm not letting you go again. Like, I've done so much for you. You are not leaving." And it's like, oh my god, like you read it and you're like, "Oh no, like this is not the way to do it." I believe that it was terrible that the child was taken, but the way that they approached that child was better than you are doing,
Yeah.
and it's so messed up, and it's such a hodgepodge of just disgusting thoughts and ideas, and there's no right way to think about it. It makes you feel uneasy and a bit off.
Yeah, and I think the person it's most upsetting from my perspective too is Shy, because I
Yeah,
feel like Shy does have some sense of that. I think she did get a kind of glimpse of like, well, she's witnessing how destructive Lamb is in that
mm,
state and how far he's willing to go. And he's supposed to be their protector. And at a certain point, I think he just decides it's more about winning than it is about saving the children.
yeah, he
It's really
definitely
strange.
reaches that point.
Yeah, it's really strange how it goes that far. Um, but yeah, it just disturbed me so much. And then the
And
weird
you really,
mechanical dragon too, that was just so bizarre.
yeah, yeah, and you really expect when the dragon people are introduced, you expect them to be the catalyst at the end of the book, and then to have them be wiped out
Wiped
and
out.
then move forward. It's like, oh, Like it's very it's a real that feels in my head what would be considered grimdark in terms of like realistic, like with this large force has come here and has decimated. Um, I don't think that's also. I'm not even going to get into grimdark. That's a whole mess of worms. But yeah, that's definitely one of those moments that sticks out as uh, it's a real interesting discussion that Abercrombie's having, and I don't know what to take away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you said it, but that thing of using the tropes of Western in a fantasy environment fits so well. Even the ending with the riding into the sunset of Lamb. Yeah. Yeah, it is done really well. I do wonder, I know there could be some concerns, I think, especially from modern readers about how I know this wasn't published that long ago, like about 10 years ago, but maybe there could be some concerns on how indigenous people are represented in the book.
I felt that at one point. I think I said that to you, um, where I was thinking about that, and also that's why I related it to Bone Tomahawk because there is a sense of like in that film, there's the discussion of well, these aren't those indigenous people. These are a different group. But evidently, we're only seeing these people, so it seems like you're making a comment.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's the same here. Is like you can clearly see where they're drawing from, and it isn't a good archetype that he's drawing. But I also think that fits in terms of how like they're not the bad people. That's what I think got this book over the line is that the dragon people aren't the bad people. That it's the union and how they influence that society and crush it, that they are the problem. The book doesn't the book never condemns the dragon people for what they do. The book, if anything, is very much like the union is bad. Like what they are doing, what Costco's doing, they are the true problem. Those people just wanted to live, and that they're living in a harsh world, and they're making decisions, but they aren't harming people in the sense of they are, but they're taking the remains of that. Like they didn't kill those people. They did take the children from those people, but they aren't responsible for those deaths exactly. So it's an interesting juxtaposition where I feel like I also do agree that I would understand the real sensitivity to the portrayal. Um and I mean there's also a reference to like the R word, which is also reading it now is like, oh, and then you realize that like even that long ago it was completely normalized and everything there. Um and so yeah, there's a lot in this book that I can imagine being sensitive to people.
yeah,
But I feel like if you've made it this far in first law, you've got a pretty good stomach for that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah.
I think I could definitely understand that being a concern for those who feel that way. I think that's pretty valid. So let's go ahead and go towards the end, the confrontation with Shivers and with Lamb. What was it you were going to say about that?
Yeah, so the Shivers and Lamb and especially Pit, because that whole interaction was one of the most perfect, not even culminations to like this story, but a culmination to the entire series so far. Because we've got Shivers letting him live because of how he sees Pit, and he sees Pit, and he's like, oh, this person's going to come after me and get revenge because I'm doing the exact same thing that he did. And he has that realization of like, that person is going to become me and I'm going to be Logan. And that's just, it's going to be that circular nature. And so that's like in my head, that's why he doesn't do it. He lets Lamb live for that reason. But when you read it from Pitt's perspective, and you've got Pitt being like, no, like I want Lamb dead. Like I am only rooting for you to kill Lamb. And it's like a horrific sense of like if Shivers had killed Lamb, Pitt would have been fine. Pitt would have been joyous. But Shivers only does it because he sees himself in Pitt. And I think it's just so
Wow,
it's
yeah.
such a beautiful like it's really crazy but beautiful dynamic between these characters. And Yeah, that was like a brilliant piece of storytelling for something that's been built up for a very long time.
Wow. Honestly, I don't think I really read it deeply enough to recognize that that's what. No, I did recognize that was why Shivers decided not to kill him, but I think there was something. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what you were saying. So Shivers decides not to kill Lamb because of him seeing himself in Roe
Yeah,
or Pitt. Is it
Pit. I
Pitt?
think it's Pit. I don't remember exactly.
And yet Pitt would be okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah, Pit, like, because I think there is a point where it switches from Shiver's perspective
Mm.
to Pit, and Pit's like, it's Shiver's being like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do it because that kid's gonna come after me," and then it cuts to her, and she's like, "Oh, like, I all I wanted was him dead," like, and it's such a it's such a dark, twisted thing, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely
Ah,
brilliant.
that is
Um,
brilliant.
yeah, he is a I don't think there's a person that there's no one that writes like Abercrombie.
No.
There's not a soul that can do what he does. And another thing I was thinking of was that his cast of characters in terms of, do you know, like there are some series where a recurring character is like um a real moment where you're like, oh, it's them, and that type of thing, where say like in everyone talks about the Cosmere and that type of thing, where you've got these overlapping characters where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe it. It's a real like aha moment. Whereas in Abercrombie, it's like, oh, here's this person from this book and this person in this book meeting, and this feels completely organic. And I think that's the way I describe it: is every single interaction that Abercrombie creates all feels completely organic compared to quite a lot of fantasy writers where they have imagined this in their head as a real like collision point, if you get what I mean, where a recurring character is there and it's like, now this is the moment, this is the reveal and everything. Whereas like the what's his name, the guy from the Heroes, the one with the burned face,
Um,
the one that's become an inquisitor.
I I cannot remember. I'm
No,
sorry.
oh yeah, yeah, you said you were struggling with names. It's not
I do. I have
but
several side
do you know
characters.
who I mean? The guy that's got like he was the guy in the last book that in this one is the one that's he's the Inquisitor that's ordering people. Pike, that's it, Pike.
Ah,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, thank you. Pike is just there, and you're like, oh, it's Pike. I remember him, and it's like constantly that where it's like, oh, Costco's now meeting Pike. Pike's meeting Temple. Like it's all these people
Yeah.
interloping and like interacting, and
I'm so bad about that sometimes because I do forget people.
yeah,
I at the same time, I feel like he does an amazing job with it.
yeah,
Even as early as Best Served Cold, I thought, "Whoa, he's bringing back so many characters."
absolutely, and it
That
never
was not
feels contrived.
No, no, it doesn't, and it seems always to fit the plot perfectly. Like,
Yeah,
everything just seems very seamless, and it's amazing because even me, I don't even really remember I couldn't remember Pike's name, but what's amazing to me is even if you don't remember those specifics, it's still entertaining, it's still good, like, you'll still enjoy your time.
yeah.
So, I guess
Um,
I should oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? Have I forgotten? There's a good chance. Um, I'm just gonna move on. I've completely forgotten.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I guess that I could say that Lamb might be an exception for me as far as, like, attachment to characters, because I did feel a lot of relief that he didn't die, but then
Hmm.
it's, like, also twisted. It's like
I was actually
I
gonna
also feel,
say,
like, glad he's alive, but it's sort of twisted in a way. I don't know, that he is
yeah,
alive.
like you're glad that he's alive, but he's gone on such a negative trajectory where it's like, I probably would have been better knowing nothing about the rest of his life because I could have imagined that he was happy. Whereas now I know that he was happy and it was all taken away from him. And
Yeah,
it's like one of those things where it's like, is it better knowing for the worst, or is it better living without the knowledge and being able to imagine? Is it better to have a fantasy of someone's life than actually knowing it? Um, and I was going to say, even in terms of the recurring character of um, Lamb, that that would seem like such a big character to come back, but because it works so perfectly in the tropes of westerns of like the grizzled old man who's retired and doesn't he's put down his gun and doesn't want any drama anymore, get him dragged back in for a final mission type thing, that fits so well that you're like, oh, this isn't contrived. This is very clearly planned and well executed.
Yeah. And I just, again, the name Lamb, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. That idea. I would love to see Abercrombie's notes or
Mm,
guidelines. The way that he connects characters, like you said, yeah, it's just brilliant. He's a brilliant writer in general. He is just brilliant. I still couldn't believe it. Like, I think that's the thing to me where I see just his skill as a writer improving for every single book. I know somebody was saying, "Who needs a plot?" Somebody was joking about that earlier because his character work is so good. That was how I felt when I read Before They're Hanged. That book I felt like changed me as a reader because I thought, "I am enjoying my time with these characters so much that I don't even care about the plot anymore."
yeah.
And then it turned out there was one, that was just sort of under the radar, and that was brilliant, I think, the way he did that, but I don't know, and in fact, I think that's something I love about his plotting, is that it happens almost just so under the surface.
Yeah.
It's like where some writers, they put themes under the surface, and you do have some themes, I think, with Abercrombie, you're bringing up a lot that weren't necessarily on the nose. Some of his themes are a little on the nose, but it's his plot that I feel like goes under the surface and then
Yeah.
comes out when you just least expect it.
Well, I think we were talking about the idea of the larger connotations of his world, that we always view singular, what's seen as like very surface level, character driven elements that have these overarching, like always it's the magic, like these characters that have this play, and and we're watching like the pawns play around, and you always get that sense of there's such a larger scale narrative going on. And I think that's another thing he does really well is like there's a plot underneath everything, but there's also like a further plot. There's a further tension that you're seeing pulled like a rope, and he does a great job of hiding so many things. Um, and I also wanted to, because we are in spoilers for a book that the people should have read before they are hanged, I really want to gush about, because I read this trilogy before I started making videos, so I've never had a chance to talk to anyone about it. But in Before They're Hanged, the usage of a MacGuffin for them like going on a journey to the end of the world, like the literal edge of the world, and having the entire book be about their journey, and then having the absolute audacity to be like, there was no MacGuffin, there was nothing there. The entire book you just read, wasted time.
Yeah.
And landing that and not having me go, I hate you, I hate everything I just read, and instead going, this took this from an amazing book to literal perfection of being able to craft a story that can spit in a reader's face
Yeah.
so blatantly and then go, you absolutely love that. Like, I'm like, yeah, I did.
Yeah, yeah. It's so yeah, that's the funny thing too, is that honestly, like just my personal reading experience, I liked the Blade itself, but
Mm,
I kind of liked it the same way I liked Best Served Cold. I found my engagement kind of waning at least 3/4 into the book, and I was kind of thinking, where's this going? What's the point?" kind of thing. And I did like the ending, and there were enough elements in the story that I liked that I was going to continue, especially after everybody said so many great things. But I was a little nervous, honestly,
mm,
to continue the series. And I was really surprised that when I was reading Best of Cold, I fell in love with the character combinations and interactions to the point, like I said, where in the middle of the book, I thought, you know what? I don't even care if there is a
yeah,
plot. I don't care because I'm just having the best time with these characters. And then it turned out, like you said, the plot was like, you know, guess what?
yeah.
Nothing after all. So this is all like futile. And so it just, it really impressed me though, because I think, like I said, I think that book really transformed the way that I viewed reading, honestly, that I could just be on it for the journey with the characters in that sense.
I think that reading Abercrombie helped me appreciate live ship traders,
Oh,
which I know you haven't got to yet, but live
no.
ship traders is very much like the plot goes. I think you know this from reading Farseer that sometimes you're like, where are we? Where is the plot going right now? Like, we are we're very near to something that has to happen. Where are we going? And it veers wildly. And live ship traders also does that. And I think because it's also so character based that before they are hanged helps with that because you have that realization of I don't need to care about this. Not everything is about life and death and the end of the world and everything. Sometimes it's just about Giselle becoming someone that isn't so vain as much, but not really. He's still super
Yes.
vain. Like
Yeah.
it's like a just a little push. And being like that was completely earned and completely lovely. Like that was exactly what I wanted. And I think that's what happens with Lyship as well, that it's just it's all about the people and it takes its time.
Mm.
It's really slow paced. It's like 900 pages every book of just these people and what they're going through. And yeah, I'm very excited for you to read Live Ship whenever
Yeah,
you get to
I
it.
am too. I'm reading Assassin's Quest right now, but I mean, that's basically kind of been my evolution as a reader. I've slowly become much more about just being present with the story and not necessarily feeling like I need to get somewhere. And I think I did used to read that way, where I need to get somewhere. And I
Yeah,
think that's an okay feeling to have. I'm not saying that's like wrong to feel that way or have that experience, but I think I have kind of shifted a little bit out of that. And I think that Before They're Hanged, honestly, is the book that
yeah.
caused that switch in my brain. I think that was the number one book I can think of. Karsa Orlong, Lamb, Sil, Siri. Well, these are all very different characters.
Yeah.
Paladon. We're at the Basket Robbins earlier this year. Thomas Covenant showed up and came over to sit by them, and they were all a bit concerned with his leprosy. That would be
That's
an
quite a
interesting
ragtag
story.
group.
That would be a wild type of fan fiction there.
That would be. I
Cool.
don't know who Casa Orlong is though. What's
He's
that
in
from?
Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Ah, okay.
He's in
I
book
haven't.
4.
Oh,
And
okay. I was gonna
so
say I haven't met them yet.
yeah, so in Malazan Book of the Fallen, you know how you follow so many different characters as you read in the first 2 books, like tons
Yeah.
of characters. You open book 3 and guess what? A whole other new cast of characters. But what Erickson did was he was responding to people who said, "Oh, I guess we're criticizing that approach, thinking he wasn't able to write from
Mm.
one character's perspective." So in book 4, for the first couple hundred pages, maybe it's less than that, you follow one character for I think
Oh,
the first huge chunk of book 4, and that's Karsa Orlong. And he's basically like a kind of like a Conan inspired character, Conan the Barbarian
interesting.
inspired character. Fascinating character. One of my favorites in the series. But yeah, that's a Malazan discussion. Hope to have sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yay! Oh, how exciting. Cool. Wonderful. All right. So any last spoiler thoughts or any last thoughts on Red Country?
No, not really. Other than just it's brilliant, and I think I'm at the point now where I went to London with I met a few people, and
Yeah.
when I was there, I bought I bought the trilogy,
Yay.
and in my head I was like, this is the time now. I'm gonna finish a couple of things. I'm gonna read Sharp Ends, and then I think I'm just gonna binge the last trilogy.
Yes. Fantastic. Yeah, I like those UK editions, by the way. He's good friends with the others outside. Cool. Yeah. Well, fantastic. I honestly think it's brilliant too. I need to get on buying those last few books as well. And I had such a wonderful time, buddy, reading this book with you, Ben, and
Yeah, I had a great time as well.
discussing this with you here. And I highly recommend that experience for anybody who reads Abercrombie. I just think there's something about buddy reading these books that just makes you, I don't know, it just deepens the experience, I think. So,
Yeah,
because
because
there's so
sometimes
much
you
to appreciate in the each of the characters and storylines. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes you have like these bits where you notice something about his writing and you kind of fixate on it. And I definitely noticed that like there were certain parts that I was fixating on, and then all of a sudden you were talking about similes. And
Yeah.
for the rest of the book, I was like, oh my God, like this is something I hadn't even noticed about his writing that is incredible. And I think that definitely helps. And like you were fantastic in terms of like buddy reading with and having someone to bounce ideas off. Um, yeah, it was such a great experience because I'm always so hesitant around buddy reading. Um, they scare me. People scare me. But yeah, it was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had various experiences too with buddy reading. And that one just seemed to work out perfectly. So I had a great time. And
Yeah,
yeah, I say no one does a simile quite like Abercrombie. He is brilliant with them. Just start paying attention to his fight scenes and the way he describes them because he uses similes all over the place. And they're always like the nicest similes, the nicest descriptions to describe the goriest
yeah,
content, or even just like he does that in general, but it's fun to notice those things. So, yeah, and you gave me a lot to appreciate and notice too in our buddy read and in this discussion as well. So, thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate you joining me here on the channel, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
yes, absolutely.
All right. And thank you to everyone here in the chat. Wonderful to see all of you. And hope you all have a good night. Thank you all so much. Bye bye.